Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Bahamas Freethinkers Hangout number 6. For those of you who are new to BFT, Bahamas Freethinkers, we are a group for freethinkers, skeptics, atheists, agnostic, progressive believers, people from, of all backgrounds and all beliefs, but who are open to critically thinking about things and having open and honest discussions about a wide range of topics. So that in a nutshell is BFT. My name is Kandra, I'm one of the BFT admins, and today's topic is creationism and evolution and how those two ideologies, I guess for want of a better word, can or cannot coexist. Joining me today to have this discussion is Quentin LaRota, a member of BFT, and Marlon Johnson, another member of BFT, and full disclosure, another admin for BFT. So some of you are watching us on YouTube. Please feel free to leave your questions and comments on the YouTube page. We'll be following them and asking our panelists, Marlon and Quentin, questions throughout the discussion. And if you're a BFT member, leave them in the thread for the Hangout. So just to get started, I'll let you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves, your beliefs, your backgrounds. So Quentin, you go first.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Quentin LaRota. I'm an educator and a unionist for the past 16 years, a father of 8 kids, grew up in a little village, Fire Road, Apico, that also produced 70 Defines and Troy McIntosh, our Olympian. And I always was interested in religion, science, and what people think and why they think it. And so I've spent a lot of time studying with different denominations in Christianity, looking at studying with Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, researching as much as I can, and also where science and religion, where they go together and where they conflict, and trying to work out for myself some of these things intellectually, which is why I enjoy conversations with people who have a different view on certain things, and I appreciate in particular those who take the topic seriously enough that they would engage others in discussions or debates. Why one of the things I appreciate when I met Marlon online, I first heard him on Bodhi Show, because he was promoting BTC, not talking about his worldviews. And I appreciate that he engaged me and my assertions. Rather than, I think some people in the group just say, well, if someone is a Christian, they have to be ignorant, and that just it, why even engage them? And that's not an open mind. That's a closed mind, and you don't grow. I like to be challenged, I like to be stretched, I like to have things I believe, question and examine, because that helps me in my development intellectually. And with that, I'll rest.
All right, well, thank you. Look like our moderator got bumped off for a second there, but I'll just pick up from where you left off. I'm Marlon Johnson, and I'm one of the administrators and founding members of Bahamas Freethinkers. I have been a atheist, agnostic, skeptic for probably the last 27 years of my life, or pretty much all my whole adult life. Once I would have left high school, and like Quentin said, I enjoy engaging people to find out what they think, how they think, and how we can keep an open mind and open dialogue on a range of subjects. I think it's important that we have the dialogue, that we not get trapped into one singular way of looking at the world, and that we always keep an open mind for new possibilities and a relentless pursuit of the truth. So that really is who I am. We've had Bahamas Freethinker now for just over a year. We have to 900 members, probably about 100 active members, or engaged members, I would say. And that has been quite a journey to see the range of different ways that people think in the Bahamas and the community of free thinkers that we do have, which has always been something very encouraging to me. So that's me, and in a nutshell. I presently live in Belize and work for the Belize Telemedia Limited, but I am Bahamian through and through.
Great. So as I said before, this discussion is about two views of explaining the diversity of life on this planet. Essentially, we have creationism, which is the belief that the universe and life originated from specific acts of divine creation, so that there was a creator, and evolution, which is essentially a change in inherited traits in organisms over successive generations. Right, so two very different ways of explaining how we got the diversity of life on this planet. And so I guess what I want you guys to both address is why you hold the belief that you do. Why, Quentin, why do you think creationism, in a brief, just a little intro, why you think that explains the diversity of life? And Marlon, why you agree with the theory of evolution?
Well,
Quentin.
well, honestly, I mean, I was born in the Bahamas in fire. My grandmother was the first person to introduce me to the concept of God and with the Bible. And I noticed very early on that there were a lot of different views or different denominations as to what the Bible said. I always liked science, and from early on, I wondered about evolution and its apparent challenge to what the scripture claimed. That was really challenged when I went to college. I had a professor of philosophy who was an atheist and an evolutionist. And the first class, I would guess, this is about 25 of us. There was probably 2 of us left who had any belief in God after the first class. What I appreciate then, though, is that he challenged me to think about what I believed, why I believe it, and the application of reason and logic and thinking things through was my first real introduction to it. And so I began to examine what I believe, do a lot of historical and biblical research on my belief system, where they originate from, what are the evidence, the justifications for it. And after torturing myself mentally for some time, I remember I couldn't sleep some nights just reading. I came up with a fairly good understanding. My belief system was supported by evidence, not just a blind faith. And I settled on that what I see in the natural world, the empirical evidence, what can be observed, is more consistent with theism than atheism. And I am prepared to defend that scientifically and philosophically.
And Marlon?
Well, my views on how we come to gain knowledge is predicated upon the scientific method. And that scientific method says that in order for us to gain an understanding of any phenomena that we see, we follow the evidence. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the notion that the 8 million or so species of life that we have on Earth is the product of evolution via natural selection and a little bit man-made selection as well. When you look at things like cow and corn and some of the other things that we consume and dogs. But largely it's a product of evolution via natural selection. That's what the evidence strongly suggests. It doesn't suggest that anything divine in what we see in life, and until and unless evidence is provided to the contrary, then I think we have to be rational thinkers, just as we do with all other lines of inquiry, follow the evidence. And that really sums it up. It is the explanation that's best supported by the available evidence.
Okay, so I should clarify here that we are talking specifically about the Christian creation story and not any of the other, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of creation myths out there. And so, Quentin, I think you mentioned in your introduction that you sort of studied other denominations. Did you ever sort of step outside, like study any other religions outside of Christianity?
Yeah, I have, because one of the things that people don't realize, in the Bahamas, teaching is a melting pot. We have teachers from Europe, India, we have Buddhists, a lot of atheists, teachers, Christians from different denominations, backgrounds. And so I've engaged all of these people in dialogue about what they believe, how they come to believe it, and why. And so I looked at it. The thing that's unique about the different creation stories, outside of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of the creation stories have a universe already existing and God's emerging from that universe. What we call them is cosmogonies or theogonies. Deities that develop from a universe, whether it's a primordial ooze or something like that, that's already existing. Christianity and the other two monotheistic religions says, no, there was a God outside of the universe that created it. And that makes it unique. And the characteristics of that God is far different from the gods that typically atheists would compare the Christian God to. These would be called God of the gaps. One example would be, of course, Thor. Thor was the god responsible for lightning and thunder. So you do some atmospheric physics in high school, you find out it's static electricity, boom, Thor disappears. Because he was supposed to be the creator of lightning and thunder. You find a scientific explanation, and he's gone. We have a different kind of God, and the evidence. I disagree with Marlon, of course, on where the evidence points. I think that the evidence is on the side of theism, and if time permits and I can expand, I will.
Would you like to respond to that, Marlon? Any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think I would suggest that Quentin take a broader view of the creation myths, because there certainly are creation stories where the gods actually actively create the universe. There's one such, it might have been African or Aztec god that was seen to ejaculate the universe into existence. There are other gods that where the universe was formed in certain Indian mythologies, where the universe came out of the belly of the god. So there is a common theme, though, and the creation story of Christianity may have some nuance, and the Judeo-Christian tradition may have some nuance that's maybe different from others, but they all follow a simple theme, which is that these were people who were seeking to attempt to explain the universe around them without access to the information and insights that we have today. Accordingly, they made it up. And they were all traditions passed on, and there are hundreds of them. That Christianity has a different flavor of it doesn't make it any more true or any less true. These are creation myths. And in fact, in Christianity, in Genesis 1 and 2, there are two separate stories. They are one of the distinctions of being a religion that has two separate versions of their creation myths inside the same founding story. So I think you can easily brush them aside and say they were the best efforts of the time for people who simply did not have the access to the information, but nothing in those stories make them give them any credence or any validity one over the other. And secondly, I think there is literally reams of evidence that support that the emergence of modern animals, including ourselves, that we are here as a result of evolution via natural selection.
So, Quentin, how would you address the criticism that, I guess, one commonality with any creation myth is that there's a creator? Where did the creator come from? How do you respond to that?
Right. Well, first of all, Marlon, I am aware of some of the other myths, but the ones I was speaking about, the ones that usually compared to Christianity, are the Near Eastern gods from Greek and Roman mythology and from Egyptian mythology. Those are the ones that typically enter the discussion, and so I address those ones. They have in one segment of Buddhism where universes are continually being created and destroyed over and over. But I'll get to the question. The Bible has a lot of merit in it, and modern cosmology caught up with it in the last century. The Bible firmly established that the universe had a beginning. This was in contradiction to what was thought by scientists all along, from Aristotle, who had the idea that the universe was a steady state. Einstein also believed in the steady state, in so much that when he did his equations and saw that the universe, the implication was of expanding universe. Einstein thought he was wrong, and he did them again. Of course, he came up with the same thing. And then a Dutch scientist and a Christian, a Jesuit priest, Lemaitre, he built a model of the universe based on Einstein's equation. And later that was expanded by Hubble, who observed galaxies speeding away from the Earth. And that then said that, okay, look, we have an expanding universe. And so if you go back in time, the universe would then be contracting, which means that the universe had a beginning and a start, which is very similar to in the beginning, God. And so we in Christianity, we don't believe in a created God, because there is this question that atheists raise about an infinite regress. We believe that God is eternal and separate from the universe, and that the universe came through him and by him. So the question that who created God is a loaded question, because it assumes that God was created. We don't believe in created gods. Created gods, we call them idols. And our God is something totally different from that. So Christianity says we have a God that always existed, who caused the universe to, he's the uncaused first cause. And modern cosmology now says that the universe began to exist between 13.8 and 20 billion years ago. And matter, time, energy all leapt into existence at this point. And so instead of the steady state, an eternal universe that makes it less necessary for God or for cause, we now have to deal with this. And as Arnold Penzias said, who discovered the background radiation for the Big Bang, that scientists must face a beginning, which was atheists held strongly onto a steady state, because the implication of a beginning to the universe was brought into the discussion, a cause, because we don't know anything that happens uncaused outside of the eternal concept of God.
But the interesting thing there with Quentin is he says that nothing happens outside of an eternal, out of a beginning, and then he immediately gives an exception. You can't have it both ways. You cannot make a statement that says nothing happens without a first mover, and then immediately grant yourself an exception. That's called the argument from special pleading. I am making a proposition that everything needs a cause, but then I am also saying at the same sentence that except this one thing I want to make an exception for. That's a convenient hook. But all you do is it's a delaying of the proposition, because your thesis is built upon the premise that everything needs a cause. And immediately that you give yourself an exception, all I need to do to respond to that is beg the same exception. I can then say that everything needs a cause except for the conditions precedent to the universe. Neither approach gets us anywhere. It's a false response. Something we either have the premise that everything needs a cause, or we say that no, there are some things that are eternal. We can't then pass to say that I am going to take a particular thesis and grant myself an exception to the thesis, but I don't grant that you the same exception. The truth of the matter is we do not know what happened prior to the 13.8 years ago, because we have not been able to pair that far back. But we do know with a great deal of confidence that there was a singularity event about 13.8 billion years ago that gave rise to the universe that now exists. That we do know when we establish. Anything outside of that presently is speculation. And it's useful to explore that because we need an answer, but it's impossible to make a claim on that thing other than this is what I believe happened prior to that 13.8 billion years ago.
Hey guys, I just want to pause for a moment to introduce my lovely co-moderator, who's a little bit late, but lovely as usual, Farrell, who is also a BFT admin, and he's just going to be helping field questions during the session. So, did you want to jump in with a question, Farrell, or you want to sit?
No, man. It seems like I came in like kind of mid-process. So you guys continue on. If
Okay.
I see any avenue or opportunity to interject, I will. But please continue. Hello, everyone. Good conversation so far.
Great.
If I could
Yeah,
respond.
go ahead.
First of all, I disagree with you that golf is lovely. That's wrong. But secondly,
I agree with you there too.
No personal.
You
no
mean
personal
we actually got an agreement?
No.
Kendra, we got an agreement. This might be the only one.
but I think what I would do is state the argument more properly. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument. It's taken from a Muslim. I think he lived in the 11th century. It says that anything that begin to exist has a cause. And so because God did not begin to exist, he is exempted. The universe began to exist. And that's why, if you put it in context, the atheists fought the idea of a Big Bang so arduously at the beginning. In fact, at the time, the leading magazine in England, Nature, the editor said we must resist the idea of a cosmic beginning because it would give too much credence to those who believe in the Bible. Penzias, as I said, is a Jewish theist, and he was excited that they found a cosmic beginning because the implication of that is that it has a cause. And so it's anything that began to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That's a separate argument. We don't believe that God began to exist. And so the question as to what caused God or who created God is assumed that there was a created God. And so I would have to disagree with Marlon on that point.
But Quentin, you only
and also, just one more thing. There's now scientific evidence pointing towards the universe coming into existence, right? Before the cosmologists got to this point, you could easily make the argument that the universe was eternal, and atheists like Bertrand Russell and those, that was a big part of their argument for there not being a God.
Or we could simply say, Quentin, that the conditions precedent always existed. You don't need, in other words, whatever that cause first mover is can also be part of the natural phenomena that we see. So all I'm saying is the same exception that you can make to create this an object of God, you could say that whatever it is that gave rise to the universe needs no divinity. Those causes could be and likely would be natural. The conditions precedent can also be natural phenomena that we presently do not understand, but that we one day understand. Similarly, it could be a divine cause, but equally, it could be a very natural phenomena as well. I'm saying there is nothing to suggest that one explanation, we're talking in the pre-universe, has any more validity than another explanation. And that's the simple point that I'm making. Is that I can grant you that concession, but you have to be prepared to grant those who would interject a natural explanation the same leeway if you are to be fair intellectually. That's the point I was making.
Okay, so we have a member question, and that is, why is there this new urgent push to marry science and Christianity? This has not always been the case.
Well, I guess that's a question to me?
Well, to both of you are going to address it.
Okay, well, I don't think that there's an urgent rush to marry Christianity and science. I think the answer of that question is perhaps ignorant of the history of science, how science arose, where it come from, and the apologetics from men like C.S. Lewis, who were scientists and Christians, and so forth. I would grant the viewers here that popular Christianity doesn't include a lot of the kinds of Christian that perhaps I am. If you watch TBN and some of the other televangelists, they try to get you to not be reasonable, not consider evidence and facts. It's all about searching for a miracle. And that's where they use that to take monies out of people's pockets. But there have always been a strain in Christianity who took the advice of Peter that says, always be able to give an answer for those who question why you believe what you believe. And the Greek word he used was apologia, where we get the term apologetics. And so that's the type of Christianity that appeals to me. And I join a host of scientists and philosophers, some of whom have built the world in which we now live through their discovery. So it isn't that there's a rush, I think, now to marry science and Christianity. I would have to concede, though, that in the popular world, that there was this, people put forward this thing that somehow science and Christianity, or science and religion, could not coexist because they address two different aspects of human reality. Uh, One looks at the material world, and one looks at things like faith, purpose, and so forth. But I think there's a good marriage between the two because they started off as a couple.
No, I think that the challenge that faith is having now is as people look at the world more rationally, they tend to put down their faith. There's a Gallup poll that's a little bit dated now, but the Gallup poll said that if you look at all of the scientists, including computer science, mathematical engineers, and the like, only 5% of them accept the creationist standpoint. That's 95% of all broad scientists, as broadly defined, only 5% of them accept the creationist view. If you narrow that field down and you look at only life scientists and earth scientists, people who deal with things like astronomy and physics and biology and the like, only 700 out of 480,000 scientists accept the creationist view. They are incompatible as long as religion tries to make truth claims about the origin of the universe and about the origin of man, then they are going to be incompatible. If religion moves along the line that you see happening in the Catholic faith, you see happening in the Anglican faith and some of the more progressive denominations, and concede the point that yes, evolution is true and real, yes, the Big Bang singularity does represent an accurate said that Genesis is allegory and not literal, not to be taken literal, and move from a literal to a mystical sort of representation of what they are about, then they may have some opportunities to survive. In a world where information is much more democratically disseminated via social media and via the internet, religion is having a hard time keeping hold of information and spreading a lot of falsehoods. And because people now have access to information and different perspectives, they are abandoning a lot of the faiths in droves. And I think that will continue unless and until religion is honest enough to say that, you know something, we can make truth claims on these things because they are not the truth. They are allegory, they are myths, but we believe that there is some mystical element about what we do. There is some community, there is some sense of hope and belonging that we could bring, and I think religion has to evolve if it hopes to survive.
Well,
so I'm going to back
Quentin.
up a little bit, and we probably should have done this at the beginning. So I think most of us, most Bahamians are familiar with the creation myth in the Bible, but I find a lot of people are confused, genuinely confused about what evolution is, what evolutionary theory sort of seeks to define and understand. And so, Marlon, if you could sort of briefly sort of outline what it is and some of the evidence, I guess, that's used to support this theory.
Yeah, unfortunately, evolution has been given a bad rap. Most believers accept things like the germ theory of disease, the theory of gravity, the theory of atomic structure, and don't blink. The theory of planetary movements. And so in most of our lives, in most believers' lives, they accept those without question, rightly so. When it comes to the Big Bang theory and the theory of evolution, and all of a sudden, these are scientists who are overreaching. And that it's kind of unfortunate because it's the same methodology that underpins all of them. If you're going to question the evolutionary theory, you should be questioning the atomic theory. And what the evolutionary theory says is that the divergence of life that we see on Earth stems from two major elements. One of them is that we share one or a few common ancestors going way back in time to about 3.5 billion years ago, and because of the forces of natural selection on populations in a very competitive environment where organisms have to compete for food and to mate, those organisms who are able to replicate successfully and pass their genes on are going to predominate a landscape, and over time they will diverge and lead to the number of species we have here. So to account for the divergence of life that we see in the modern world, that took place not by any sort of divine fiat, but simply the designer was natural selection working in a competitive environment. And that is the essence of evolution, and that's what the theory backs up. It's supported on several different planes. It's supported in the fossil record. It's supported in what we now know of embryology. It's supported in the sort of structure and anatomy of various things, and it's supported, most importantly, in the genetic record. So we have different disciplines that all point to a converging story of how we got here, and there is no real argument in the academic and scientific community as to its validity. The only pseudo controversy we have is that some people in religion, because it doesn't match their aesthetic view of how they think they came here, protested. But there's no real protest. There's no real controversy other than what has been contrived.
So Marlon, if we came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Absolutely, the famous question, and you get it all the time. And again, it's a funny question, but it speaks to the ignorance that is being purposefully portrayed even in schools today, where they're not telling the children the truth that we do not come from monkeys, but that we share a common ancestor. And the reason that we know this to be true is because we can go back and look at the genetic heritage, and we can trace back, and we know that we are more closely to chimpanzees, for instance, than chimpanzees are to gorillas. The creationists will argue that that's an argument for common design, not for common heritage, but that's nonsense. Simply because it's the same technology that we use to be able to know that I am related to my grandparents, or I'm related to my second cousin, or related to my third cousin, and that we share a common ancestor. It's that same methodology and technology that allows us to be able to say with certainty that we have a common ancestor and that we are cousins. We are a monkey's uncle. We are their cousins. And that is beyond any reasonable challenge.
Well,
so Quentin, I want to follow up on something you said. A member asked a question. You sort of said that Taliban, like, I guess more fundamentalist Christian leaders don't want people to be rational or to actually look at the evidence and think about these questions. So the member asked, are you saying that the televangelists are indirect in their approach to the question or to the theory of evolution?
Sorry, say that again. If they are,
so you made the comment that you sort of differentiated yourself from like people on CBN, the Pat Roberts of the world. Do you think that their approach, when we talk about Christianity trying to marry itself to science and sort of promoting itself as having always been a supporter of science, do you think that their approach, that sort of approach of asking people to ignore it, I guess, is an indirect one? Or do you want to expand a little bit more on that point?
Well, I want to respond to what Marlon has said about credible challenge evolution. But I'll address your question first, and also the comment about Christians trying to marry themselves to science. Look at the history of science. Science arose in the 16th and 17th century in a Christian worldview. All of the early scientists were Christians, and there are many Christian scientists today. The Big Bang Theory was a theory first supported by Christian scientists and opposed by atheists. I'm a believer in the Big Bang Theory. I don't believe in evolution. And all of the early Newton, Christian preacher, Clerk Maxwell, Scriptures Above His Door, Kepler, science is like thinking God thoughts after him. I already spoke about Lemaitre, who gave us the first model of the universe that was since proven to be more accurate as to what we have observed. Arnold Penzias, he's a theist from a Jewish background, but he's a believer. On and on. All of the big names, the majority of the big names that you could trace back to the early development of science are all Christians. And so we're not trying to marry ourselves to science. We gave birth to the modern science. And I'm not only supported by that from historical evidence. There was a study done by an Oxford atheist, Joseph Needham, because he wanted to understand why science arose in Europe and not in China, because China had a lot of technology, but they didn't have the scientific method and this observation and experimentation. And he concluded, this is an atheist and a Marxist, that because the China didn't have this unifying principle of a God. To expand on that, it's called Whitehead's thesis. Men became scientific because they believed that nature had law, because they believe in the lawgiver. Now, some atheists now would concede that. They just say, well, thank you for your contributions, and bye-bye now, we're beyond you. But to make the statement that we're now trying to marry ourselves with science as if we were never a part of it, or we didn't give birth to it, I think don't take into account this historical record. What I would say, because of the persecution of Galileo from the Catholic Church, we have this imagery of, and that's the Catholic Church. And Marlon would identify the Catholic Church as a progressive church that I was never a supporter or believe in the Catholic Church, because their dogma does not have the Bible as the sole source of inspiration. The traditions of the church, the edicts of the Pope can decide what their doctrines are. So there's no one basis for truth. And so I'm a Protestant Christian. So I just want to address that. We're not trying to marry ourselves into science. We were the parents that birthed the concept. And you can all go and check it out. Francis Bacon, Father of Modern Science, strong Christian. If you hear me say God has two books, the Bible and nature, I'm quoting Francis Bacon.
So can I ask then, how do you sort of, what do you think of the fact essentially that religious mores and what religion thinks is natural or unnatural or okay or not okay has varied with scientific progression, and it butts heads because Galileo is a perfect example, because the church locked him away, didn't agree with what he was saying, and only hundreds of years later said, yeah, he's right. And so I think, you say, well, the church has supported it, but I think that's a little bit disingenuous, because if the only religion, if you have to be religious and there's only one religion, everybody who was a scientist at the time is going to be Christian, like that by default. If the repercussion for sort of speaking out is death or being locked away, can you honestly say that these people are very faithful or believers in it? And I don't say that some of them weren't, but if you're going to be locked up for bucking church doctrine, that sort of doesn't support the notion that the church is or religion has always been very supportive of science.
Well, first of all, and I would make a distinction between the Catholic Church and Protestant Christianity, but that's why I don't really accept these edicts from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church adopted Aristotle's view of the universe, not the Jewish view that we inherit from the Old Testament, which says that God sits on the sphere or the circle of the earth. They adopt a lot of things in Greek philosophy, all stuff from other religions, and so they persecuted Galileo. But they were in Newton's day. Newton would have not been persecuted if he wasn't a Christian. Newton didn't have to be a preacher. Let's just say Newton was pretending he was a Christian. He didn't have to go and be a preacher and said that he wrote Principia Mathematica, which is accepted even today as the most brilliant science book ever written, expressing their hope that a thinking man would believe in God. Because even in his day, they already had atheists. J.J. Thomson, who discovered the electron, he lived in the 1900s. There was no persecution for science, and there were a lot of atheist scientists around, but he was a strong believer.
Perhaps because by then people realized that killing people for their beliefs was a bad idea. But Marlon, you've been talking for a while, Quentin. I'm going to let Marlon jump in and sort of on this.
Yeah, Quentin, I think first of all, it's a complex issue. You can't. It would be wrong of me to say that sincere Christians, have not contributed to scientific progress. But I think you grossly oversimplify it by suggesting that Christianity was the center, epicenter, and gave birth to modern science. The relationship was a lot more complex than that. And any sort of objective read of science know that there was no clear-cut science. A lot of what we call the Dark Ages, as you know, was the church's attempt to repress the academics, including science. And so a lot of the learnings from people who predated the European cultures, these would be the African learnings, these would be learnings from ancient Greece, Egypt, and the like. There was a concerted effort to repress a lot of those early mathematical, chemistry, physics that really was the basis of early science. And that was led in large part by the church and by the political order of the day who wanted to repress it. So the church's relationship to science is a little bit more complex than to suggest that they all were led on. And even today, if you were to go into a strict Islamic country, I would like to think that the scientists who are working there, many of them may be skeptics, but by virtue of the political and religious environment they find themselves in, cannot express that. We do not know if Galileo and Newton and all of those were skeptics, because the prevailing political and religious climate did not give them the opportunity to express it as much as they would. Now, I'm not saying they were, but I'm saying you can't just lump them together for convenience into Christianity. But the truth of the matter is, let me just go on record as saying this. Let's thank those early Christian scientists and whatnot who pioneered the knowledge. But that isn't what we're talking about today. Today we have a scenario where in the Bahamas and elsewhere, the church is today discouraging scientific inquiry, discouraging critical thought, discouraging the what we have learned about evolution and the Big Bang Theory, and whatever progress the church might have been as a part of early science, is certainly not carried through today. Because what you see in the Bahamas is a repudiation of science and a repudiation of critical thought, and that on the doorstep for that must be the Christian and Catholic denominations who lead the way in discouraging critical inquiry and scientific inquiry, and who are still telling children that evolution is of the devil and the Big Bang isn't true and all of these things, when we actually know better. Some churches at least are honest enough to say that these things are accurate representations of the world and our God got it started. But for the most part, the modern religion, certainly as practiced in the Bahamas, isn't on the vanguard of scientific inquiry. I would posit that.
Marlon, if you don't mind me interrupting, hold on one second, Kendra. With that, is it that the church is just simply focusing more on their thing? That is their thing. Is it that they're actually trying to steer people away from science or away from scientific discovery, or should the church be held responsible for pushing evolution or pushing other scientific discoveries and theories? I don't know if necessarily it's their position to do that. Is it?
Yes, Pharrell, because if the church is about the truth, which I suspect it is about, then the church must be able to tell people that, listen, this is what we have discovered and uncovered about our universe. That there is a truth to this, and that is a truth that is hard to deny, or we are going to encourage willful ignorance. The church is encouraging willful ignorance, because as you know, we encounter these people all the time in social media whose own scientific inquiry and whose own critical thinking have been thwarted purposefully by the church, who will tell them not to listen to you, not to discover this, to not lean onto your own understanding, and all of the different platitudes they roll out to discourage people from critical inquiry. The church have to accept part of the responsibility.
Well, if I may respond.
Sure.
Briefly.
Well, I don't have a set church. I visit churches, and so I don't know what is taught in every church. I have some disagreements on evolution. I don't believe in the theory at all, because I think microevolution, in terms of speciation or variation within a species, that is scientific. You could observe that. You can test that. That's something that we can see. To take the leap from microevolution to macroevolution, where there's a transmutation of species via natural selection and mutation, I think that's a leap of faith. And I don't have enough faith to believe in that. Because, first of all, evolution itself is an incomplete theory. Evolution cannot tell you about the origin of life because evolution presupposes a self-replicated molecule. And the only thing they could come up with is that they said the Earth is about 4 billion years old. And there was a primordial soup and rocks, and somehow life emerged. No, that was proven wrong. There's no spontaneous generation was proven wrong 125 years ago. There's no example where a living thing could emerge from something non-living. There's a scientist called BFT who put a living cell in a test tube with all the right balances of salts that would need to constitute life. And then he pricked the cell with a pin, and all the constituents of the cell came out. His theory was that, look, if I set all the conditions right, with the perfect balance of salts and minerals that the cell needs, and I put the cell in the test tube, and I burst the cell, the cell should be able to reconstitute itself, since everything that's essential for life is there. So you can have all the conditions essential for life, and life still not emerge. Even Dawkins admitted this in his book. He said there's two hurdles that evolution has to overcome. One is the emergence of life itself, because evolution presupposes life. And second, the emergence of intelligence life. Because even for us humans, to survive and to dominate, we don't have to be as developed intellectually as we are. We're way beyond man's survival. We are able to question, consider, and think about our origin. 99% of mutations are harmful, and organisms are designed to prevent mutation. If they were something that were beneficial, we would have. I would think that.
Can I ask where you got that statistic that 99% of mutations are harmful?
I got it from a science book. But they say between 95 to 99%. If you ask a scientist typically to name a beneficial mutation, they would be hard pressed to find more than one if one. Right? Most mutations are harmful. We have in our bodies an enzyme called transcriptase. The job of transcriptase is to remove mutations when the cells are replicating. We fight against mutation in the natural world. Natural selection is a mechanism that makes the species stronger. The pressures from the environment, the slow zebra is the one the lion can eat, so that the fast zebra can be the one to carry on the genes. The weak and those, they get culled out, and the ones that are most adaptable and fittest, they survive. Natural selection helps to preserve species, not to change them. They make them stronger. And I don't think the variety we see in the natural world can be explained by mutation and natural selection alone. And the evidence for evolution, most of them are lies. If your theory is so sound, for the theory of gravity, you don't have to create a lie. If the theory is so sound, Piltdown Man, Nebraska Man, Archaeoraptor, all these hoax trying to find a missing link because he wanted to fulfill Darwin's prediction, which he predicted that the fossil records will show animals in transition. We've never found that. You want us to believe, honestly, that a hippo, or hippo-like creature that weighs about 2,000 pounds, after 10 million years, goes to a whale, and the air becomes an echolocation?
All right.
So Quentin, can I now respond to you?
Let me interject, because he said ask a scientist, and I'm a scientist. There are lots of beneficial mutations. One, sickle cell trait, when it's heterozygous, is beneficial. People with the trait don't get malaria as badly as people.
Hold on, excuse me. I just want to
because
like, if I don't have arms and the police is handcuffing everybody,
excuse me, I'm the moderator.
Okay,
but if you want to present things as
that's the one. That's the goal.
Stand down. Stand down, Quentin. Stand down. Stand down, Quentin. Go ahead, Kendra.
You just threw out a whole lot of stuff that's just false. If you take antibiotics, because bacteria have developed resistance, or and you take, higher level antibiotics, the more resistance they develop. Bacteria mutate. That's established. Like this is fact. And organisms accumulate a lot of mutations, but what happens is they accumulate them in non-essential areas of the genome. Like this is fact. So 99.9% of mutations not fatal. The reason why we have so much diversity is because organisms can tolerate a lot of mutation. You have a lot of mutations that don't change the amino acid code, or if they do change it, it's a small change, so it's not deleterious.
I have to respond to her. She got involved in this.
So
I want to carry on her point a little bit.
Go and learn.
But I have to respond to her.
No. Let me carry on. Let me make the point, Quentin. You spoke for a while, Quentin. You got the chance. Quentin.
Yay.
Most mutations are neutral, because most mutations don't express themselves in the genome. They work on a part of the genome that does not express itself in the organism. So the majority of mutations are neither positive or negative. They are just there. A lot of the mutations are negative, because if genes mutate, it creates a disadvantage on the expression. Remember, it isn't the gene being mutated, it's what it causes it to express. So, for instance, the mutation of the genes that makes a giraffe neck longer is a mutation, but it don't necessarily kill the giraffe. It gives them an advantage to be able to reach higher food. The fact that when our genes mutate to allow us to be able to utilize milk and milk products past our infancy was something that was advantageous to people who grew cows and who grew animals that gave off milk that humans produced. That was a mutation that allowed us to be able to consume milk long past our infancy, when for many populations of the world, they still don't have that mutation that allows them to remain lactose tolerant into their adulthood. There is a range of mutations, but mutations aren't the only way that species evolve over time. There's sexual selection. Your children, all 8 of them, come from the same gene pool directly, but all of them, I imagine, are different in various ways. And some of those differences will confer different reproductive and survival advantages to them. Children who are taller, smarter, nicer looking, better groomed, have a better chance of providing a mate and being able to take care of themselves. So there is a host of factors, mutations and sexual selection, which have a profound impact on the offspring. And that is evolution. Every time we have a child, we are laying the foundation for evolution, because there are differential success rates in successive generations. Some offspring will produce more than others. Those who produce more will have traits that get produced more. It's an exponential growth. So that part really isn't hard to figure out. But you made a lie when you said that we have not found transitional forms. We have found many transitional forms. And I want to use that whale. I want to use that whale example to give you 2 that you could Google yourself. All right, because I figured you were going to pull that. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to give you a specific example of transitional forms. And if you give me 2 seconds, I'm going to get to it. But what I want to do.
Well, while you're looking for.
Quentin, we can give you an opportunity to respond. Go ahead, Marlon.
No, Marlon, hold that. And let me.
Quentin, Bacillus you can look for. And my TCDs, I will send them to you, and you could do your own research, and they will demonstrate transitional forms between the land animal and whale. And the reason we know that a whale is related to a hippopotamus is because we can track the DNA. That's how they know. They don't have to guess that. They know that because they can go back and track the DNA history of them. And whales and dolphins, in their front flippers, they have a wrist, they have a forearm, and they have fingers. Why would a dolphin or a whale have the same same anatomy in their arm structures as would a mammal? It's because their ancestors were mammals. they have no reason to be in the water and to have wrists, hands, and fingers, bones in their flippers. And they also have leg bones and shin bones. Whales and dolphins have leg bones and shin bones, although they don't have legs and shins, because that's the vestigial part. And this is something you can research yourself.
I researched that. I got that, and I would respond to that. But I want to start with the moderator.
One.
Right. First of all, this thing about not being able to get malaria because you have a sickle cell is one that's put out all the time. And as I said, if the police is coming to handcuff all of us, and I have no arms, great, I can't be handcuffed. But when you put me in the regular population, it falls away. It's a disadvantage. It doesn't do anything. It's only in that one instance you have a condition that's harming you. And this one instance, because of a harmful condition, you see that as an advantageous. I reject that.
That's where it counts. If you can't survive in your environment, then you're dead. So the context that mutation happens in matters. You can't dismiss it and say it's bad for you. It might be bad for you in one context, but it's good for you in another. So it's really not as simple as you want to portray it as.
But there are some mutations.
I gotta finish. As I said.
And can I also add that sort of making blanket statements that scientists lie is pretty defamatory and just
go look a pill down, man, and it's a lie.
That's the thing. But you take offense to people calling Christians ignorant. That's in the same category. So if you don't like people calling Christians ignorant,
some Christians are ignorant. Some Christians are ignorant too.
Right, but you can't take offense to
those scientists who
to the other.
Okay, here's it. If you're a scientist and you find a pig bone, right, and you add onto it and purport that as a missing link, if you glue a chimpanzee skull to a human skull and said, this is what you found in the quarry in England, and this is a missing link, you're a liar. I don't care how nobody, you're a liar.
So let me clarify. So you're saying that all the fossils that have been identified are things that people
I didn't say all. No. You can definitely know generalization of all. What I'm saying is, if the theory is so true and correct, you don't need to create lies to support it. But I want to get back to answering.
Sorry, do you have
bacteria?
Lies?
Yes, bacteria. You have a culture of bacteria. Some of the code on the bacteria will have a mutant that the antibiotic cannot attach to, and those bacteria will survive because the antibiotic cannot attach to it. But if you remove the antibiotics and put those bacteria in the regular culture, they are at a disadvantage. So I don't see that as I can extrapolate from that to I am descended from a rock 4.5 million years ago, and that humans and a banana and a tomato are related. No, I saw those two those creatures that Marlon talked about, and they are believed to be, in the textbook I read, they are believed to be a link between land mammals and a hippo and a whale. They're believed to be. That's not certain. Second thing is, the whale has no vestigial organs. That's a lie. Those bones are for attachment, for reproductive organs. Vestige is something that's out of use. It doesn't use anymore. It has no function, no purpose. But those whales need those little bones to have baby whales. So you could believe that, but that's not true. Right? Even our tailbone, that they say vestigial. You have 9 ligaments that are attached to that tailbone, without which you can't do some important functions. You have the appendix that they said was vestigial. We now know it's a part of the immune system. And without your appendix, you're likely to get it's more likely you would catch certain diseases. And all the arguments for common ancestry can also be used for common design. If you're going to create a world where organisms...
Quentin, let me just stop you right there, right? You see, if you were making the suggestion if that there was one particular level that was required to prove evolution, then perhaps you would have some merit. This is what I mean. What gives the theory credence is that you have different disciplines converging to give you the very same explanation, so that you're not reliant on any one factor. The most compelling of all of those, though, when it was first uncovered that whales and dolphins, same family, were related to land mammals, that was hard to accept initially because it didn't seem so. But once they were able to match the DNA, they realized they were able to trace the common ancestry. That's why they know that a dolphin and whales are more closely related to hippos than they are to many sea creatures. You mentioned the fact that the bestial legs in the thing help them mate. Well, first of all, that hasn't been proven. But secondly,
Yes,
there are no, it has not. But secondly, there are the most marine life don't have those same features and are able to mate successfully. There was no need for an intelligent designer to build something looking like a leg and a shin to do that. Nor was there a need for whales to have a wrist, hand, and fingers in their flippers when most marine animals do not need that construction. There are several disciplines converging to come up with the same answer. Not just one, not just two, more than that. And these are the things that converge. And finally, I just want to make one point. You say you don't believe that we could go from a single cell to man. You're interjecting your own bias into the discussion. If you want to learn how we move from single cell all the way up to man, the information is there for you to go and research and to understand why they can use our DNA sequencing to form the relationships and to enable us to say with some degree of certainty this is the length of period between the emergence of life and where we are today. There's no need to guess or believe any of that.
Marlon and Quentin, Marlon and Quentin, 1 second. We're kind of like an hour and 3 minutes into the discussion, and this has been, for the last maybe 35 minutes. It's been heavily scientific, which is great. That's a lot. A lot of us need to understand that. But I think Kendra, Marlon, and Quentin, all three of you have, for lack of a better term, you have a good grasp of the scientific world that many of us, including myself, may not appreciate in as much detail. So Quentin, I want to ask you something that Marlon had mentioned a little early in the conversation. He said that the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, both as institutions, they've accepted the Big Bang and the evolutionary theory of evolution as the explanation for the world and mankind's existence. A few, maybe 200-300 years ago, that would have been unheard of. No church body was going to endorse those theories. I mean, the theories weren't even solidified back then, but as time progresses, more than likely, more and more church bodies and belief systems are going to probably have to endorse and accept evolution and the Big Bang, even just for their own existence. So to kind of tie this to the topic, can creationism and evolutionism coexist? Do you see that being the end of your, something that you hold near and dear, Christianity and the other larger beliefs, as a literal explanation for our existence? Do you see that? Is this the beginning of the end, or can they both be kind of married together, as somebody mentioned before, and coexist?
Well, there are theistic evolutionists. Francis Collins, who was the chair of the Human Genome Project that mapped the human genome, is a very strong Christian, holds lectures on this Christian belief, and he's an evolutionist. And Marlon, I had to teach evolution for 10 years, so I'm well aware of the theory and all of what's involved with it. I just don't accept it as science. I accept microevolution. When you talk about my children having a different mixture of genes and so forth, that is true. That is something I can observe. But
no, but Quentin, but the question, itself. The question itself. Is this the beginning of the end for?
Well, I don't think so, because here it is too, and Goff. You also asking about evolution in the Big Bang. as if it was one and the same theory, and one necessarily springs from the other. Like I said to you, Christians who understand the Big Bang have, in fact, we see the Big Bang as endorsing our worldview, not opposing it. I'm a strong proponent of the Big Bang because it provides a very good basis for what's said in Genesis that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It also explains how, or it helps to assist in saying that there's a God who caused the universe to exist. So I separate that from the theory of evolution. What I would say is that those of us who are Christians, we must not retreat from the academic and intellectual discussion. We must consider these things seriously. We must hear what people are saying from science, from philosophy, from other fields, and look at our religion, and even examine our religion and find out the truth of what it teaches. Because Christianity itself is not a monolith. And even in one particular church, people don't all believe the same, they have the same interpretations. And so one thing I've started to do is learn how to read the Bible, the proper exegesis. Get what the Bible is saying in the context, look at who was written to, when it was written, and what it was trying to convey. Look at what was allegory, what was metaphorical, what was literal, what's the intent. Because then you can speak intelligently, and sometimes you find that when you do that, the differences that were seemingly there are not really there. The problem for a theistic evolutionist is that the central thing that the Bible is trying to convey is a redemption story. It's that man sinned, and God had to redeem man from his sin. Evolution. And I know that there are many Christian theists. If you accept evolution, the story of the fall of man and the redemption becomes unnecessary. So I don't know how a theistic evolutionist.
Well, exactly. That is one that you're right, Quentin. That is one of the core conflicts of evolution and creationism. Is that if evolution is real, then we didn't need to be redeemed. There's no need for Jesus and that sort of stuff to have saved us from our sins. So I get this. So you're saying basically the two can't coexist. Literalism in Genesis and the belief in the Bible, and a strong belief in evolution. Let me throw this at Marlon real quick. Marlon, I know that the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, many of us may know, okay, well, this is their attempt to remain relevant and to kind of stay at the forefront and keep their following numbers high. It's somewhat of a business to them as well. Do you think that is going to work? Do you think them simply adjusting, saying that, okay, we now believe in evolution and Genesis, it was allegory, but God is actually responsible for evolution. He started evolution. He controlled evolution. Do you think that is enough, or are we seeing the beginning of the end of that literal, looking to the Bible for answers and for explanations? Are we seeing the end of that era after a very long run, by the way? I mean, organized religion had about 3,000-4,000 years run.
Well, to answer the question, in the near and medium term, yes. I made that point several weeks ago, even before we organized this, and I said something in the group and on my own personal page that for religion to survive, it has to evolve. It has to accept the reality of things like evolution and the Big Bang and evolve. And I think what you see the Catholic and the Anglican churches attempting to do is to be pragmatic. Is to say, yes, it becomes silly after a while to try to deny these things in the face of overwhelming evidence. We accept the theory of atomic theory and the methodology that goes behind it. We accept the theory of gravity. We accept the germ theory of disease. So we can't then come in and cherry pick and say, well, no, we don't like these ones because they don't fit into our aesthetic. And that's essentially what you see happening with Quentin. He don't like the aesthetic of the theory of evolution, so he don't decide he's just gonna believe something else. I don't think that's a pragmatic approach is going to bear fruit. So the church has to make that quantum shift because they cannot hide information from their congregations the way that they used to. We have and a lot of the scare tactics and tactics that people use to ostracize atheists and to ostracize different things just don't hold water. Because we have communities like ours where people can hold divergence views. So the stigma that goes along with alternative thinking doesn't hold water, and people are not chained to those channels to get their information like they used to. So the church has to evolve if it's hoped to remain relevant in the medium term. Longer term, I think you're going to see us move a little bit more to that spiritualist woo kind of religion, because people like religion. People like to think that there's a sky daddy looking after them, and there's something more to this, and there's a hope, and then there's a community that churches put together. They get to celebrate milestones in life, birth, deaths, weddings. So there's a sense of community and a sense of hope that churches give. And I think what you will see is organized religions will change. And then over time, a lot of this modern woo-woo spiritualism that people kind of tend to like, where, you know, I'm not really religious, I'm just spiritual, and I believe in Mother Earth and Gaia and hold hands and kumbaya. And I think you're going to see people move more into that sort of thing. And eventually, the notion of Adam and Eve story and sin and blood and Jewish God who drowning babies and all that stuff will cast away, because it's simply untenable. It is highfalutin nonsense. And we as a people have to move past that kind of thinking if we hope to survive.
So we have a couple of questions from viewers. Quentin, somebody asked, I'm sure you are aware of William Paley's teleological argument as sort of a counter to evolution, that, you know, basically if you walk in the woods and you find a watch, the watch must have had a maker. So can you tell us, well, so first address that, and then we have a couple more questions.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because before we get to evolution, we know that we have a universe, and we have a universe that is designed, in our view, with a purpose. We put in the teleological argument, which says that the fine-tuning of the universe, because the universe is very fine-tuned for life, it demonstrates that there's a purpose behind life. It's not a random thing that didn't happen, because there's some quantities and constants that we find in nature that if they were changed by a hairbreadth, 1 in 1 million, million, and so forth, life couldn't exist as the way we know it. We're talking about nuclear strong force and weak force. So they were off by the tiniest margin. You couldn't get atoms and so forth. If gravity was off by just the smallest amount, we couldn't get what we have now in the universe. So all of these fine-tuning is saying, or leads one to the conclusion that, look here, there is a purpose behind the universe. This did not just happen. And so typically those of us who make a case for the existence of God will first use the first cause, as I articulated early on, the Kalam cosmological argument. We look at the teleological argument, which is how incredibly fine-tuned the universe is. That has gotten some odd responses from atheists.
Well, Quentin, what is it, Quentin, let me just get in there. What is it fine-tuned for? When you say the universe is fine-tuned, fine-tuned in whose perspective? For what? For light, for sound, for planets, for humans, for animals? What is it fine-tuned for when you say the word fine-tuned? Quantify that for us, please.
Yeah, for life and human life. What we're saying is there's some constants, the gravitational constants, some forces like nuclear weak forces, strong forces, and so forth. If they were different or off by the slightest margin, life as we know it could not emerge. The existence of life is such an incredible occurrence, even the most simple life, that even cosmologists and astronomers who give the universe 20 billion years, it's baffled to find out, even in that amount of time, how life could emerge. Crick, who discovered the double helix, the DNA was a double helix, even postulated that aliens must have left, or someone outside of this universe must have left pods here that became alive. This is someone who was a respected scientist and an atheist. So we see this incredibly fine-tuned universe for life, and it's amazing. Now, to get around it, there have been some some propose like multiverses where you go back to chance. And so you really have two ultimate realities. Either there's a mind behind the universe who created it all, or there's a universe that emerged from nothing. We don't know anything that just pops into existence.
Right.
Everything that comes into existence has a cause.
Yeah.
So
we have a couple of questions coming from Ms. Quinton. We have a couple more questions related to this. One is, if the universe is so fine-tuned, how is it that there aren't lots of planets filled with life similar to that on Earth? And why does an all-powerful maker need to fine-tune? If he is capable of anything, can he not make life work in any condition?
Well, I think the question underlines a false understanding, I think, of the nature of science and explanation. What are we trying to say? What science does is science answers how questions. And that's where we get the confusion. Science tries to discover the mechanisms behind how these things were done. What we get from God is the why questions. That's why Kepler said science.
I think maybe you didn't understand the question. It's why does an all-powerful, so to the fine-tuning,
what I'm saying is,
if the universe is perfect, why aren't there lots of planets with life? And why does an all-powerful maker need to fine-tune?
Why does he need a fine-tune? It isn't a matter of need.
Why
that's
does
what I'm
he
saying.
Fine-tune?
It's a misunderstanding. God does not need a fine-tune. Science has discovered the fine-tuning that God already put in place. So it isn't that God needs a fine-tune.
You're not understanding the question.
Understanding the question.
Put it like an understanding. Because it seems to me that the individuals are asking, why does God need a fine-tune universe?
Quinton, why is there not life on any other planet? Why is there not life on any other planet?
No,
that's
the question is, why does he need fine-tune?
No, when I said that the universe is incredibly fine-tuned, that's for life on Earth that we know about. We don't know. We know that there's other life. If you take the Bible, you would know that there's life elsewhere in the universe, because the Bible talks about heaven and angels and so forth, wherever that may be. But we're talking about the fine for life on Earth. Even in basic things, if we don't even look at those micro stuff like gravity and weak forces and so forth, if we look at the distance from the Earth, between the Earth and the Sun, the difference, the distance with the Moon and the Earth. If you throw them off by very small margins, life on Earth can't exist. It'll either be too hot or too cold. There'll be too much. There'll be no land, too much water. So all of this is a part of the fine-tuning. And so it seems to us that we are here by purpose. That if one incredible thing is disturbed by the smallest amount, that throws off everything. And we have a multiplicity of factors that leads us to where we are now. That suggests to us not blind chance, not necessity, but purpose.
All right, Marlon, could you invite to get Marlon in there?
Quinton, really and truly, that absolutely is nonsense, and I'm going to explain to you why. It's a very, very simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the fine-tuning of the Earth. Life exists in a variety of divergent ecosystems. Me living in Los Angeles or San Diego is finely tuned to human existence. But the penguin won't find life in San Diego a treat. Nor would the cactus find life a treat in Antarctica. There's a treat for the penguin in Antarctica and for the cactus in the desert. The point I am making is that life conforms to its environment. You hit the nail on the head when you say life as we know it. Our life has evolved to match its environment, to exploit its environment. If it was a different planet with a different makeup of gas and all the other things, life would have evolved differently. If instead of oxygen, we might be able to metabolize nitrogen, we would have a different kind of blood and a different makeup. What you were saying is the argument that a puddle on the ground is in a crater. The puddle is looking around and saying, how nice, for God to create this crater just the perfect size for me. Well, the crater isn't the perfect size of the puddle. The water filled up the crater, not the other way around. And that's what you're saying. You're saying that life, that the earth was finely tuned for life. But what you're really saying is that life tunes itself to its environment, and we see that every day in the vast range of life that we see, from bacteria that could survive in volcanoes to creatures that can live in deep sea caverns, to penguins that can live in Antarctica, to humans that can live in a temperate environment. Life conforms itself to its environment. And conditions are only ideal for the specific kind of life that you see. As I mentioned, a God wouldn't need to fine-tune anything, because a God can make life happen anywhere, according to if a God is truly all-powerful.
No, I think, Marlon, you're arguing something way it's different from what I'm saying. I'm talking about fine-tuning not just at the level of the earth, I'm talking about the universe being fine-tuned, because, okay, if gravity was off by
but gravity isn't off, Quentin. The universe has certain principles. I understand what you're saying. The universe has certain principles.
Gravity is only one of those things that helps us to have the kind of universe where we have life.
Where we have life as we know it, Quentin. In other words, if you have a universe that had different conditions, life would have emerged differently.
But that's speculation.
You're looking at it from the lens.
You don't know that.
We cannot say that. No, we can't say that.
You can't say that there will be. You've left time and you've gone into speculation.
But Quentin, I'm going into speculation. You're the one who's talking about fine-tuning.
But fine-tuning, it's a fact.
No, that's nonsense.
Nobody even argues fine-tuning.
But it's fine-tuning.
The response to fine-tuning has been not that there's not fine-tuning. Check out with the top atheists. Check your Hawkins. Check your Krauss. They don't argue about the fine-tuning.
Quentin,
that's a fact. What they argue about is that
Quentin,
cause and response is not what you just answered with. That's not what I was talking about at all, that they're not diversity of ecosystems. I'm talking about a universe being fine-tuned so that life could emerge here. And what I'm saying is,
no life emerged to match the conditions, not the other way around. Life emerged to match the conditions of the universe, not the other way around.
You didn't have the conditions. No, Marlon, if you don't have those conditions, life can't emerge.
No,
if you don't have sunlight, all you have to do is this, you have any living thing that breathes oxygen, you remove the oxygen, it can't live.
Not all living need light.
So it's not that life, you need these conditions for life to emerge. Nobody in scientific communities really argue about how amazing it is that these conditions exist. That they propose something else.
Quentin, there are many species who live without zero sunlight.
No, I'm not saying.
And those species have been evolved to exploit the environments where there is zero sunlight. Sunlight is not a condition of that is necessary for life. That's my point. That's the only point I'm making.
No, yeah, but what I'm saying is you're arguing something that I'm not saying. I am not saying that on the planet Earth there's not a diversity of life in various ecosystems. That's demonstrably true. What I'm saying is to get to that point, you have to have this. The rate of the universal expansion from the explosion of the Big Bang. Cosmologists say if that was off in any way, in the smallest amount, you could not have a universe that permits life. The answer to the fine-tuning is not that there are different diversity of life, because it has nothing to do with the question. The way your side has answered it is by proposing multiverse.
No, it isn't a side. I'm not on the side. I am saying this.
So what I'm saying is the top cosmologists and astrophysicists.
Quentin, I can explain my answer. The point is that life emerged to exploit the conditions that are there. The universe is that it is, right? It is here. It is in a particular way, and life has emerged to exploit what it has found. Just like the puddle has exploited the crater in the ground to create a perfect puddle. The crater wasn't created for the puddle. The puddle exploited the crater. And that's my point. Life has exploited the conditions that is found in the universe. That does not mean at all. That does not, because the universe has evolved the way that it does. That, explain to me how that provides any evidence that it was created specifically for that. It happened to be that, but that doesn't provide any evidence at all for any divine intervention.
Because here is it, Marlon. The fine-tuning of, for you to have a universe with constants and quantities so fine-tuned that even if the rate of the explosion from the Big Bang was off at any amount, if gravity was off at any amount, if the nuclear small and weak, strong forces and weak forces were off in any amount, along with I think 30 other things that must happen just right for Earth to emerge, and that's just a macro level. That's not talking about the solar system that we're in. What does
your argument falls down. Quentin, your argument falls down because God does not need to fine-tune a universe. A God can make it happen under any circumstance.
Time out, guys. Time out. Let's let our wonderful host, Kendra. Kendra, you have the mic, Kendra.
Yeah. So we're gonna have 2 more questions just to wrap this up because we're about to hit an hour and 30 minutes on this conversation. So one question for Quentin, and then for, I guess, well, everybody who interested was, you accept some science, and you said you were a science teacher, but why don't you accept evolution? And then the other question is, if God simply spoke everything into being, why did it need to be fine-tuned and scientific to maintain it? Why doesn't it just work because he said so? That's like speaking a car into being, but being unable to drive it because you lost the key.
Kendra, make sure you unmute the mics.
Yeah.
He has to unmute himself.
Yeah, he has to unmute himself. Do you want to go, Marlon, and address that?
So repeat the question for me while you unmute it.
Okay,
I guess you can sort of speak of this as someone who wasn't.
Okay, am I back now?
Okay, yeah, you're back now. You can go.
I'm back now?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, why I accept all science, but science is not static. Science is not a democracy. Science is continuously researching and checking things out. So things that were true in science years ago are no longer true. One example would be that Newtonian physics explained very well the mechanical world which we live in and got men to the moon. Einstein improved on Newtonian physics, and now Einstein theory was regarded as the best way to explain how the universe works. And now we head into the new area of quantum theory. And now with Hawkins, I'm trying to even go beyond that. So it's not a matter of just accepting one theory. You have to challenge certain things. I don't accept evolution because the evidence that they provide for evolution, to me, is not convincing. It's not like gravity. And let me also explain this. Physics and chemistry are hard sciences. The theories that evolve out of physics and chemistry have a lot more certainty than biological ones. Physics and chemistry are based on a lot of mathematical formula, and maths is the only science where you could have lockdown proof, and they are closely related to maths. Biology things and theories and ideas change all the time. There's a lot of guessing in biology, and you look at evidence to support what their guesses are. But like I say, if evolution was so true, there would not have been all these attempts by evolutionists to fraud. You don't find that in physics.
No, Quentin, no.
I could give you
Quentin,
a
no.
But I want to move on.
First of all,
Let him talk, Quentin. You've answered.
Quentin, please. Quentin, you pointed out that there has been some fraud in science, period. So scientists are humans, right? The good news, though, the good news is, you know who found out those scientists in the main? Are the scientists. Right, and you know why? Because science is always challenging itself and always open to interpretation. Can we say the same thing about the Bible? No. The Bible was written. No. The Bible was written 3,000 years ago, and you're still trying to defend things like Genesis 1, which is clearly fatally false. So because but that's exactly what you're doing, Quentin. Noah's Ark story did not happen, but yet still there are Christians trying to defend nonsense because you have to fit the narrative, you have to fit the story into your narrative.
Well,
the Tyre, the city of Tyre, was said it was going to be destroyed and never rebuilt. It was rebuilt. It's a thriving city, 3,000 years old. And Christians like yourself are trying to fit the reality into the narrative, saying, well, it must have, obviously, God must have changed his mind and the like. Your doctrine does not have the benefit that science have to be successfully challenged and overturned when found wrong. That is the science eternal strength, is that it does something that your religion cannot do. It can look itself in the eye and say, we got that wrong. Yes, there was fraud there. You are defending a book that has been translated, mistranslated, copied, and altered over thousands of years, that the current translation bears little resemblance to the original text, but yet still you all won't concede that.
Because
so you want to talk about discipline and rigor, you have to apply the same thing to your own view of the world. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't claim.
If I may respond to the red herring. We were discussing evolution, the fraud in evolution. I never brought up the Bible.
I brought up the fraud in the Bible. I want to show you. I want to contrast it.
No, what I'm saying is, and so if you want to have the discussion on the Bible, we can have that. But and I would say this quickly. The one thing I appreciate about the Bible, as opposed to the Quran and other holy books, is the Bible is falsifiable, because the Bible names dates, places, times, events that are concurrent with
the Noah's Ark happened. The Noah's Ark and the flood happened. The Noah's Ark and the flood happened.
Oh, I certainly believe that it does, and there's evidence for the flood.
Oh, for goodness sake.
But let me answer
the question first. I think
Kendra, we definitely need a round two at another time.
Yeah.
Question for you guys here again. Quentin and Marlon.
But I would answer my question.
This is, I know we're ending at
let Kendra wrap up. Go ahead.
But I think so, Quentin, I'm going to ask you to give, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to give some closing remarks, because it's running late. We've already gone over our allotted time, an hour and a half. So if you could, give us your parting thoughts, things that you want to emphasize. Any of that, Quentin? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay, you have quick 2 minutes, Quentin. Go ahead.
Yeah,
okay.
2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Mr. Goff, you have my sincere thanks for giving me this opportunity to exchange ideas and dialogue in this forum. And Marlon, thank you for being open to engaging me in this debate. What I will use the next minute and a half I have is just the confusion I think that we have is about the nature of science, the nature of explanation, and the nature of God. God is an agent. It's like, I would use the example of Frank Whittle and a jet engine. I could give you a jet engine, and you could study the physics of the jet engine, the chemistry of the jet engine, the fine-tuning of the jet engine to complete its function, but that don't mean that the jet engine did not have a creator. And so the relationship of God to the universe is like Frank Whittle to the jet engine. God is the agent. It's also like a bread. You can study a loaf of bread. The constituents that make it up, its chemistry, its function, that won't tell you about its baker. It also won't tell you why the bread was baked in the first place. To get that, you have to have a relationship with the baker. To know why the jet engine was created in the first place, you'd have to have a conversation with Frank Whittle. If I told you that here's a Ford car, right? Explain it, and there's just one option. Either Henry Ford or the law of internal combustion, you would say I was absurd. Because to fully understand the car, you need both explanations. One of an agency, an entrepreneur, and also the natural laws of science and physics. So to explain the universe, you need both. You need the scientific explanation with laws and reactions and so forth, and you also need the explanation from the agency. And I think if we could deconstruct and unconfuse those 2 points, we'd have a good starting point. We also have to remember that science has its limits. It can tell you how things are done. It really can't tell you why. Science can't tell you why you're here.
And
What's
that's
your
your
purpose
time.
or what's meaning? Thank you.
Marlon?
What Quentin sees as confusion, I don't see it that way at all. To suggest that there is a why is to beg the question. There does not need to be a why, and why is a human construct for us to explain context and intentionality. What we apply in our everyday existence does not necessarily translate into natural phenomena. There may not be a reason why the hurricane emerged out in the South Atlantic Ocean. There is just that there were conditions precedent that allowed it to happen. There does not necessarily be a why. Why is begging the question. Quentin is making, and others like him are making an assumption regarding the deity. They have no proof, they cannot provide evidence, they assume it to be, and they want you to grant an exception for it. The good news, though, is that we have come a long way in our own understanding of the universe. We do not have all the answers yet, but we know enough to know that evolution is factual. We know enough to know that there was a singularity that gave rise to the universe as we know it 14 billion years ago. And I think the way we answer some of those questions that Quentin want to know about what happened prior to that is not to just imagine or assume a deity. It's to continue doing what we're doing. It's to continue to research. It's to continue to ask the hard questions. The universe may have an agent, but why can't that agent be a part of a natural phenomena as well? It does not necessarily have to be anything divine. We can't assume that to be so. You're just making an assumption that has nothing to substantiate it. Let's continue to research. Let's continue to look for real answers as opposed to relying on 3,000-year-old superstition to help inform our answers for which we have no way to verify. On that, I thank Quentin and all of you for being part of such a wonderful, lively debate. I look forward to a lot more.
Great. Thank you, guys. And I just want to thank our viewers who participated and offered their questions and comments to make for a very lively conversation. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Marlon. And thanks, Farrell, for jumping in to assist, a lovely assistant. And I wish
not so
everybody,
lovely assistant as the case may be.
I wish everybody a good evening.
See, we end on agreement again.
Have a good night, guys.
All right, guys.